Et bonjour mes élèves, c'est Madame Brown et aujourd'hui on va parler du passé composé avec le verbe être. So, in my first video about the passé composé, we talked about using avoir as a helping verb. In this video, we're going to talk about using être, the verb to be, as a helping verb to form the passé composé. So, you needed to have watched that video on avoir to understand what the passé composé is and what it means. I'm just going to keep moving on to talk about verbs conjugated with être instead of avoir. So some verbs, both regular and irregular, are conjugated with être instead of avoir in the passé composé. This applies to intransitive verbs, which means they explain the action of the subject, not the direct object. So these are usually verbs that express motion or a change of place or state of being. So these verbs on the right, the ones with the superscript number 1, just to kind of let you know, those are irregular verbs in the present tense. Aller, venir, partir, sortir, naître, mourir, revenir, devenir. And the past participles, we have some with a little superscript of the number 2. That's just to indicate that these past participles are unique. They are not like what you would expect from regular ER, IR, or RE verbs. So remember, every time you learn a new verb, you need to learn its past participle. So this is a long list. You can pause the video, look over it, try to memorize it. Make sure you memorize those past participles so that you can start using them in your work, when you're speaking and when you're writing. So avoir or être, to have or to be. Knowing whether to use avoir or être in the passé composé can be tricky to learn. For now, your best bet is to memorize the most common verbs that use être in the passé composé. So many teachers like to teach this acronym, Dr. and Mrs. Vanderkamp. I'm not a huge fan of it because I find that it's very long. So that's a long acronym that you have to try and remember. And you can't always go through this whole big list when you're trying to speak or when you're trying to write. So we're going to skip that, and I would rather teach you about a shorter acronym, Advent. So with Advent, you really only need to memorize 6 verbs and their close opposites. We also have this really cute drawing on the right that I did create, but it's based on a drawing that someone else has done, but it helps to illustrate what these verbs are, and that might make it easier for you to remember them. So looking at the letter A, the verb arriver, to arrive, and its close opposite partir, which means to leave. Then for the letter D, we have descendre, which means to go down, and its close opposite monter, which means to go up or to climb. Then for the letter V, we have venir, which means to come, and its close opposite aller, which means to go. Then for the letter E, we have entrer, which means to enter, and its close opposite, sortir, which means to exit or to go out. For the letter N, we have the verb naître, which means to be born, and its opposite, mourir, which means to die. And then finally, for the letter T, we have tomber, which means to fall, and its close opposite, rester, which means to stay. Not exactly its opposite, but kind of close. Now, what you do not see in the acronym is up there in the top right corner, we have the verbs revenir and retourner. So to come back and to return. We also don't have the verb devenir in this drawing because it's the verb to become, but it is a close relative of venir. Now, how to form the passé composé with être. So in French, with this group of verbs, you need to conjugate être in the present tense to agree with your subject pronoun. So this is stuff you should have learned in first year French. Je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. Okay? Then you add your past participle. Now remember, I told you every time you learn a new verb, you need to memorize your past participle. So the tricky thing about être is that your past participle has to agree in gender and number with the subject. So that means you add an E if your subject is feminine, you add an S if your subject is plural. Remember, your subject is the one doing the action. So notice for je suis, we have two forms of aller, one for masculine, one for feminine. Same thing for tu. Il, we only have one form because it's singular and it's masculine. For elle, we add an e. Now, that does not change the pronunciation of the past participle. Even with that extra e, it's still pronounced the same. Il est allé, elle est allée. Same thing. Nous sommes allés, we add an S because it's plural. And if the people to whom we're referring are feminine, and then we need to add an E as well. Same with vous. Vous is a little tricky though, because vous can be singular, formal, to say you, sir, went. Vous êtes allé, with nothing added to the past participle, but vous can also be plural in both formal and informal contexts. So then we need to add an S. And then ils sont allés, we just add an S for they. And elles sont allées, we're going to add an E because our group is feminine and it's plural, so we add the S. Okay, so unlike verbs conjugated with avoir in the passé composé, the past participle of verbs conjugated with être have to agree with the subject in gender and number. So masculine singular, il est arrivé hier, he arrived yesterday, we don't add anything to the past participle. But if it's plural, ils sont arrivés hier, we add an S to our past participle. If it's feminine singular, elle est arrivée hier, we add an E because our subject is feminine. And if it's plural, elles sont arrivées hier, we add an E and an S. Now remember, the pronunciation of arrivé does not change, even though there's an extra E and an S. Think of these past participles like adjectives that describe the changed state of the subject. So like adjectives, the past participle has to agree in gender and number. Looking at this chart, pratiquer, convert the singular masculine form to the other form. So first person, we have je. If je is masculine, we don't do anything to the past participle. Je suis allé au parc. But if je is feminine, then we add an E. Je suis allé au parc. If we're talking plural, that would be nous, we went to the park. Nous sommes allés au parc. We add an S to the past participle. If we as a collective group are all feminine, then we add an E as well as an S. Nous sommes allés au parc. We went to the park. Second person can be tu or vous. Remember, tu is informal, vous is formal. Tu es arrivé hier, vous êtes arrivé hier. So we change être, but we don't need to change the past participle. For feminine singular, so if the people to whom we're speaking are feminine, then we add an E to arriver. If we're addressing a group of individuals, as in to say, y'all arrived yesterday, all of you arrived yesterday, then we add an S to our past participle. Vous êtes arrivé hier. If the group to whom we're referring, also remember that could be a mixed group, masculine and feminine. If there's mixed genders in the group, we still default to the masculine conjugation, masculine agreement. But if, however, the group is exclusively feminine, then we add an E and we add an S because it's plural. Vous êtes arrivé hier. Third person, masculine singular, that's il, I-L. Il est resté chez moi, he stayed at my house. But if we're saying third person feminine singular, we're speaking to she, elle est restée chez moi, we add an E to rester. Masculine plural, they stayed at my house, we add an S because it's a plural group. But remember, that group could be masculine and feminine. It could be a mixed group of people. It doesn't have to be exclusively masculine. Ils sont restés chez moi. But if the group is exclusively feminine, then we say elles sont restées chez moi. We add the E because they're feminine, and we add an S because it's plural. They stayed at my house. Okay, practice conjugating these intransitive verbs in the passé composé. You arrived late. Second person masculine singular. Okay, that doesn't tell us formal or informal. Could be tu or vous, but in this case, let's use tu. Tu es arrivé en retard. You arrived late. Julie has gone out. We're going to use verb sortir, third person feminine singular. Julie est sortie. We add an E to sortie because Julie is feminine. Paul and Marie have left. We're using verb partir, third person masculine plural. We default to the masculine because Paul is there. If it was Anne et Marie, we would use feminine, but it's a mixed group, so we default to the masculine. Paul et Marie sont partis. We add just an S to the past participle. I came back yesterday. We use the verb revenir, to come back. First person masculine singular. Je suis revenu hier. And then you went without me. The verb is aller, second person feminine plural. Because it's plural, it has to be vous, can't be tu. So vous êtes allé sans moi. So notice that the subjects here are changing their state. You arrived, you went out, you left, you came back. That makes them intransitive. They don't have a direct object. Now, as I mentioned, that these verbs are conjugated with être because they're intransitive, but that means that they're not followed by a direct object. However, in some cases, some of these verbs can become transitive and take on a direct object. And when that happens, you must conjugate them with avoir in the passé composé. This also means you don't need to make the past participle agree with the subject. Now, in these examples, notice that the intransitive verbs are all followed by prepositions. That's not always the case, but it's a pretty common clue to look for. All right. Il est retourné à la maison. He went back to the house. He changed his state, right, where he was. As opposed to il a retourné le livre. He returned the book. The book is a direct object. Elle est rentrée de France. She returned from France. As opposed to elle a rentré la voiture. La voiture is a direct object. So we can use avoir. With the first example, elle est rentrée de France. She's changing her state of being. So we have to use être and we add an e to the past participle because she is feminine. Je suis sortie de la maison. I walked out of the house. Again, we have that preposition there, de, as opposed to j'ai sorti les valises. I took out the suitcases. We can use avoir because we have a direct object. And we don't need to make agreement with our subject pronoun. Okay, nous sommes passés entre des icebergs. We passed between some icebergs. We changed our state. We were passing through something. So we use être. We have to make agreement with the past participle. As opposed to nous avons passé les frontières, we passed the border. Yeah, you could argue we're changing our state, but in this sentence, actually, there is a direct object, and that is border. Then finally, vous êtes descendu de la montagne. Here's our preposition again, from the mountain. Y'all went down the mountain, so we have to make agreement with the past participle. So we add an S and we use être in our conjugation. As opposed to vous avez descendu l'escalier. In this case, l'escalier is our direct object. So we can use avoir and we don't need to make agreement with the past participle. All right, pratiquer. Practice conjugating these verbs in the passé composé. Decide whether to use avoir or être. Il montait l'escalier. Il a monté l'escalier. L'escalier is your direct object, so we can use avoir. He went up the stairs. Il descendu du toit. Du toit is from the roof. Il est descendu du toit. He came down from the roof. Vous sorti hier. Vous êtes sorti hier. You went out yesterday. Right? You changed your state and where you were. Tu retournais les papiers. Now, retourner can mean return, but it can also mean to turn over. And so here we have a direct object, les papiers. So we have to use avoir. Tu as retourné les papiers. You turned over the papers. Je, and here we have retourner again, but now we have a preposition, au travail, to work. So that means we're going to use être. Je suis retourné au travail. I returned to work. Il sortit les livres. Les livres is a direct object, so we can use avoir. Il a sorti les livres. He took out the books. Tu descendu les boîtes being the boxes. And in this case, they are a direct object, so we can say tu as descendu les boîtes. You took down the boxes. And then finally, je montais au grenier. So au is a preposition. Grenier is the attic. So we're going to a place. Je suis monté au grenier. I went up to the attic. So we have to use être. All right, merci beaucoup. There is still a third video on the passé composé. It addresses reflexive verbs in the passé composé, which are also conjugated with être. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir. À la prochaine.